Another episode of Pathways to Our Past, or PP for short. Isn't that right, Travis? Oh, Travis isn't here today. Isn't that right, Joe? Oh, Joe's not here today either. But I am hoping to get both of them back on one of these videos sometime soon. Today we are at the Chief Yellow Thunder Memorial, which is a burial site commemorating a chief of the Ho-Chunk Nation here in the United States, specifically in Sauk County, Wisconsin. And besides his burial memorial, we also have the memorial of the burial site of his wife, always in the back, which could also be translated as She Who Follows. Chief Yellow Thunder was part of a delegation of 15 chiefs and one woman who went to Washington, D.C., that woman being, always in the back, Chief Yellow Thunder's wife and the daughter of another one of the Ho-Chunk chiefs. And because of their trip to Washington after that, she got the moniker Washington Woman, as you can see written on the stone down here. They went to meet with President John Quincy Adams to discuss the federal government trying to acquire some of their ancestral tribal land. And the delegation told the president and his associates that they don't have the authority to sell the land, but they basically got strong-armed into selling some of this land out here because they did not have the means to get provisions to return home to Wisconsin from Washington, D.C. in the winter. And in order to be able to afford the food and provisions to return home, they basically had to sell some of the land to the federal government, which they did, even though they, like I said, they claimed they did not have the authority to do it. And so they vacated some of that land. And then around that time, there were a myriad of local native wars and uprisings. And one of those uprisings by another tribal group led to the death of some white American colonists, which in turn led to a military response by the federal government, meaning that in nearby Portage, a fort called Fort Winnebago was built, and it became a military post for the federal government. And because of this military response and the potential for actual violence, Chief Yellow Thunder and some of the other Ho-Chunk chiefs eventually ceded what remained of their ancestral homeland here to the federal government in exchange for a place on a reservation in Iowa. They were intentionally deceived with this treaty because they were under the impression that they had 8 years to vacate the land, but really they only had 8 months. And when they did not vacate in time, they were arrested and deported to Iowa to the reservation. Chief Yellow Thunder and his wife returned here several times from Iowa and got arrested and deported multiple times, including being deceived again by being invited to Fort Winnebago to get provisions, and were immediately arrested and deported to Iowa. Eventually, Chief Yellow Thunder, with the help of a fur trader, hatched a new plan, and he purchased 40 acres of land here north of Baraboo. And because he was an American landowner, he could occupy that land on his homeland without being arrested and deported because he owned it now. So eventually this area here became a bastion, or kind of an enclave, a safe harbor for many members of the Ho-Chunk Nation. And essentially a village was built up here on this 40 acres of land. And then in 1874, Chief Yellow Thunder died. And if the dating is correct on when he was born, he lived for about 100 years. And then a burial marker was put up just outside the property line of those 40 acres he had owned, indicating his burial place. Eventually that was found, and a much larger memorial to his burial and his wife's burial was built by the Sauk County Historical Society, which is this stone cairn standing in front of me. And we assume that this was the plot of land here, and there was a village here at some point. Besides this memorial, in 2020, the county and the Historical Society started to regrow a lot of the prairie grasses and plant life that were here back then. Because as you can see, a lot of this is private farmland. They made a concerted effort to bring some of the prairie back through meticulous seeding and targeted controlled burning. And so over the last 4 years, this has really built up. So there's this small little trail around here that has these interpretive signs that explain some of the events that took place during Chief Yellow Thunder's life. And you can see these prairie grasses, these different prairie plants as they grow up here. And then you have a nice little bench under a tree. So I sat down on this bench to do my favorite segment of the show, the premium beer review. It is a little bit chilly because it was below freezing today and it was a little frosty, but the sun is coming up and it is melting some of the frost. This is a nice little spot to watch the sunrise, but you have to look behind you to see it. Typically, for the premium beer review, I buy beers that are relatively cheap, but have superlatives written on the can to make them sound better than they are. But this time I actually got a superlative in picture form. This is Old English brand 800 malt liquor, and it's got a crown on the bottom of the can and a crown inside the O. So this is our premium beer for today. Let's see how it tastes. That's definitely cheap malt liquor. Oh, I think I'd rather have Mickey's, but I can understand the appeal for some people for this beverage because your alcohol to cost ratio is pretty efficient, and I could see people on a budget using this to get intoxicated quicker because malt liquor has a much higher ABV than beer. As for the 6-pack review of Old English, I'd probably give it like a 1.5 out of the 6 Old English cans. I'd much rather have Mickey's malt liquor if I am drinking malt liquor, and I wouldn't be surprised if these were manufactured by the same people, and this is just the cheaper version. As for the 6-pack review of our visit today, I will give this a solid 4 out of the 6 Old English cans in the 6-pack review. It's a relatively peaceful spot, barring the loud county highway behind me and all these cars going by, which I'm sure you can hear. It's a pretty place. It's got a nice little bench. There's not a whole lot to do here besides a short little walk in the Anthem Memorial. But it's a nice little park that's been built up recently, and it's a niche part of history, but it's a significant part of history, especially for someone like me who grew up in Sauk County. So I think it's a pretty neat spot. That's it for today's episode of Pathways to Our Past. Thank you for watching and listening, and we will catch you next time.